The Bible has a lot of strange prophecies in it. Malachi, the very last prophet of the Old Testament, talked about some incredible things. First of all, he mentioned that in the last days, in the day of the Lord, that would be the end of time, or at the end of the sixth millennium, beginning of the seventh, that the great prophet would be, Elijah would be given back, that Elijah would come. And this is in the end of the book. But at the beginning of Malachi, he makes another statement that seems quite strange. He said, I hated Esau, the God of love. Theologians have wrestled with this down through the centuries. How could God, the God of love, say, I hate Esau? In fact, it goes on to say in verse 4 that people shall say of Edom, the progeny of Esau, that they are the border of wickedness. They are the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. Who are these strange people, and will they be around in the end of days? Will they produce, as some rabbis say, the Antichrist? Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the enigma of Edom.
Enigma it is. Forever, that's a long time. And when God says he's going to hate forever, it's literal. And J.R., what's fascinating is that the hatred that the Lord speaks of seems to be a quantity that goes back into the dim mists of time, perhaps eternity, because the birth of Esau is a mysterious birth. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, through them the seed of the Redeemer was called. But Isaac's wife Rebekah was barren, so Isaac prayed, entreated the Lord that his wife might conceive. And when she did, as we read in Genesis 25:22, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. Verse 23, and the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Amazing. She hasn't even given birth, and the babies are fighting, struggling within her. This suggests, J.R., that there's something almost transcendental about the struggle that goes really back before time. That the babies born are carrying on a struggle of universal proportion, perhaps similar to the struggle between Christ and Antichrist, or between God and Satan.
You know, it's interesting, Gary, that Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel, which are the epitome of good and evil. And then we come down to Abraham. He had Ishmael and Isaac, which again are the conflict between good and evil.
Yes.
And yet of Ishmael, we don't have in fact, we don't have it said of Cain, we don't have it said of Ishmael that in the last days God's going to wreak judgment upon them. But when it comes down to Esau, God takes him all the way down to the end of time, to the battle of Armageddon, and to the battle of Gog and Magog. Yes. And God has something incredible to say about Esau and his progeny. In fact, one whole book of the Old Testament is given over to the judgment of Edom, and that would be Obadiah.
Yes.
Though it's a short book, it's concerning one people only, and that would be the offspring of Esau.
It's the pronouncement of doom upon Edom. By the way, it's kind of fascinating that Esau's name was changed to Edom because of his characteristics. Edom in the Hebrew means red. And one day, Esau had been out hunting. He came in hungry. In the meantime, his twin brother Jacob had boiled up a pot of red stew. And I always like to think of it as like chili con carne. You know, we have a red stew these days called chili that's made in 100 different ways. So there's this pot of chili on the stove, and Esau comes in hungry. He says, give me some of that. I could eat anything. I am fainting. I'm so hungry. And so a transaction takes place. And he says, I'm so hungry I could sell my birthright for a bowl of that. And he did. And that red stew gave him his name, Edom, which is red. And it's fascinating to me, J.R., that down through history, red or redness is associated with battle or war. For example, the red horse of war in Revelation. Or in our own day, we have people called Reds who march under a red star, and they love war, and they love hostility and battle. And when we think of a red army, whether it's like a Chinese red army or a Russian red army, there is the quality there of ferocity in battle. And that really characterizes and typifies the personality of Esau.
I guess, Gary, it also could typify the color, that is, the fact that mankind himself is a fallen race.
True.
Through Adam, whose name means red.
That's right. Yes.
In Romans chapter 9, verse 11, God speaks of Esau and Jacob, and he says, "For the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth, it was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated." So it has nothing to do with whether or not those boys had already done something good or something evil, but God, in his foreknowledge and in his plan, in his call and election, he purposed that Esau would give Jacob a hard time down through the centuries, all the way to the end of time.
All the way to the end of time. In fact, we have in the Exodus in chapter 17, that when the children of Israel came out into the desert, the very first battle they had out there with the people who opposed the wilderness march were the children of the Amalekites. Well, Amalek was one of the major descendants of Esau/Edom. And then came Amalek in Exodus 17:8 and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And the story of this battle is fascinating, and it ends with this statement in verse 16. For he said, this is Moses, for he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Now this particular battle was won, and Moses pronounced a prophecy. And he said, the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Well, Lador Vador, from generation to generation, is a Hebrew idiom that means forever and ever without cessation.
All the way down to the last generation.
Right.
That's incredible.
That's our day, by the way.
Yeah, to this very day. When we come to Obadiah, he says of Edom, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. And one of the things that Esau had done that had upset God so much is that when Israel, or when Judah went into Babylonian captivity, the Edomites rejoiced over the destruction of Jerusalem. Verse 12 says, but thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother in the day when he became a stranger, neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, neither should thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. This was typical of Edom's attitude toward his twin brother.
And you know, in the days of the kings, particularly in the days of King Saul, as recorded in 1 Samuel, we have the story of God's instruction to King Saul to destroy Amalek totally. Well, Amalek, as we mentioned a minute ago, is the chief antagonist of Israel. And Saul refused, saying, what a waste. You know, they've got a lot of riches that I would like to keep, and some cattle and herds and so forth. And so he let some of their royalty go. He kept their sheep. He kept some of their cattle and some of their possessions, and directly violated God's will. It was God's will at that time that Amalek should perish. But you know, King Agag and his progeny lived on to trouble Israel even in the days of Persia. The whole book of Esther, Haman was an offspring of King Agag, who should have been completely wiped out by Saul, but was allowed to live. And so we just see this battle being played out down through the centuries.
And so Haman and his sons, who were all wiped out,
right,
still was not the end of Edom and Amalek.
apparently some of them, the Amalekites still lived on in Persia.
The rabbis have written that Amalek will produce, or Esau will produce, Gog of the land of Magog. And though he will be ruling over these people, the Magogites, who will be the offspring of Japheth, the ruler himself will be an Edomite. That's an incredible statement.
It is. And we have a lot more to say about it, by the way.
We'll be back in just a moment. According to the prophets, Edom will be the perennial enemy of Israel. He will produce Gog of the land of Magog, perhaps even part of the bloodline that produces the Antichrist. According to a Jewish commentary on the book of Ezekiel, the rabbis have written, but there is another dimension to Edom, one that carries it beyond its territorial boundaries and places it squarely at the center of world history. Edom is the last and most vicious of the four monarchies, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, Rome being Edom. It destroyed the Second Temple. In its exile, Israel has languished for close to 2,000 years, and from Edom's hands, Israel will be redeemed by the Messiah. So this takes Edom all the way to the end of history. As we look into the Bible at this idea of the revived Roman Empire and world government, the rabbis place it squarely on the shoulders of Esau. It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is. And what's fascinating is that from their point of view, and they're history watchers, let's face it, they've been persecuted by the best of them, and they've watched history. And they record that Amalek / Esau / Edom traveled to the northeast through Persia. We have that recorded in the book of Esther, and then that after that time they traveled northward into the Caucasus region and into Russia. But also, the tribe is said to have traveled westward into the Roman Empire. And I have here a quote from the Art Scroll commentary on Ezekiel, which is very interesting. It says, Gog's land is Japhetic, that is from Japheth. Gog's land is Japhetic, he himself a descendant of Esau. Gog is often referred to as Armilus in the Hebrew, which is a variation of Romulus, the founder of Rome. And as we read on, the commentator says, so it was in Esther's time when the Amalekite Haman, descended from Esau, was the instigating force in the Persian or Japhetic court. So it will be in the wars of Gog and Magog when the Edomite king Gog will lead the Japhetic nations to war. So this is the way the Jews see things unfolding. For them, Esau is Edom, is Amalek, is Rome. In other words, we're talking about four different names for the same enemy.
You know, Gary, it's interesting that Obadiah talks about Esau being hidden. Verse 6 says, how are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? So there are some hidden things about Esau, one being his generations down through history.
Yes.
Where is he going? Because according to biblical history, Edom does not exist anymore. The rose-red city of Petra is just a ghost town.
As a matter of fact, in the days of Jesus, we know exactly where the Edomites were. They were called Idumeans, and the line of the Herods, King Herod the Great and his sons and daughters were, they were called Idumeans, which is just a fancy terminology, a Latinate terminology for Edom. And if you recall, J.R., their symbol was the eagle, and Herod had a golden eagle mounted on the temple gate. Josephus records that a group of Jews were so incensed by this that they knocked that eagle down, and great retribution was taken out upon them. But even in the days of Jesus, we see this same head-to-head thing going on again and again and again. The battle that God said would last from generation to generation. Here's a fascinating thing. The sons and daughters of Herod intermarried with the sons and daughters of the Caesars and were said to have attended, for example, Herod Antipas attended the same schools as Titus Vespasian. They were good friends as children. And so they intermarried and intermingled with the houses of Rome.
When Jesus was standing before Herod the Great at his trial just before crucifixion, he was standing before the progeny of Esau. That's
True.
Incredible.
Oh, it is.
Christ versus Antichrist.
There it is.
Good and evil right there. And the struggle has continued down through the centuries. We can see this because Obadiah talks about the day of the Lord in verse 15. For the day of the Lord is near upon all the Gentiles. As thou hast done, speaking to Edom, it shall be done unto thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head. And so God has definitely a plan to destroy Edom, and he has preserved this Esau lineage in order to produce Gog of the land of Magog. And of course that takes us to Ezekiel and his prophecies against Edom, doesn't it?
It really does. As a matter of fact, in Ezekiel 32 and Ezekiel 35, leading up to the part of Ezekiel that we read with such interest, namely Ezekiel 38, the battle of Gog and Magog, we have prophecies against Edom. For example, we have in Ezekiel 32:29, there is Edom, her kings, and all her princes, which with their might are laid by them that were slain by the sword. They shall lie with the uncircumcised, and with them that go down to the pit. And in this prophecy, Ezekiel is sort of warming up to that major prophecy that comes a few chapters later in Ezekiel 38. This is kind of a preamble to the battle of Gog and Magog, promising death to Edom. You find it all the way through Scripture. It's an astounding thing. Where's Edom today? Is Edom the genetic line that will give birth to the Antichrist? And will the Antichrist come out of Rome, therefore?
You know, Gary, we have discussed Dan being a symbol of the future Antichrist.
Yes.
And I'm convinced that Dan will be a part of this, but it looks like perhaps a mixture of Esau and Danites. And as a matter of fact, Herod the Great was part Jew as well, wasn't he?
Yes, he
or
was.
Or at least part Israelite. Some of the Israelites intermarried with the Edomites and produced the Idumeans.
Yeah, and we have something fascinating, J.R. We have in Rome, the royal houses of Rome that sort of disappear off the pages of history in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries. We have Edomite blood. And to me, when Daniel prophesied that the people of the prince who shall come would be the progenitors of the Antichrist, he was saying, in effect, Rome will give birth to the Antichrist. Well, for the Jew, that's a perfectly logical thing to say, because that's what they believe. They believe Rome will be their final tormentor.
When I visited Edom, the ancient capital of the Edomite Empire, one of the prominent mountains is a natural stone formation in the shape of an eagle. When I went through the museum there at Petra, I noticed there is the head of an eagle, and it's a fascinating, beautiful, carved out of stone head of an eagle, the symbol of Edom. And this golden eagle that Herod put over the temple door was also indicative of Edom.
Yes.
The Roman Empire has the symbol of an eagle. The tribe of Dan adopted the symbol of the eagle as well. And so if we were to try to find Edom today, I guess we would have to follow the trail of the eagle.
And the trail of the eagle is fascinating. You can follow the double-headed eagle of the royal houses of the Holy Roman Empire, Habsburgs, Esterhazys. You can follow the eagle even into horrible places like the Third Reich. That was the symbol of the Third Reich. On their standards they had the eagle that was also the Roman eagle on the standards of the Romans. And I hate to say this, J.R., but the eagle has come across the Atlantic. It's even, by the way, assumed its place on the back of our dollar bill. And that's why it amazes me when you read Obadiah there is the mention of the eagle. Verse 4, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and thou shalt set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord.
How about that? Hosea chapter 8, verse 1 says, set the trumpet to thy mouth, he, that is the Antichrist, shall come as an eagle against the house of the Lord.
Wow.
So follow the eagle, folks. If you wonder where the Antichrist is coming from, he's going to go to Jerusalem under the symbol of the eagle. That's incredible. Well, there's a lot to learn about the Bible and about prophecy. This is one of the little known lessons we need to learn.